The new scenes connecting Avengers, Endgame to Avengers, Doomsday are going to blow everyone's minds. And today on Avengers Protocol, we're breaking down exactly what we expect to see and why some of these options could permanently change how we understand the ending of Endgame. Welcome to Avengers Protocol, the channel where the MCU gets the deep dive analysis it truly deserves. If you're new here, subscribe right now and hit that bell. This is exactly the kind of breakdown you won't find anywhere else. And if you're already part of this community, you already know what to do. Hit that like button, because it makes an enormous difference in helping us keep producing content like this. Straight from Deadline, Disney is going all in with its infinity screen format for its upcoming major releases. The re-release of Avengers, Endgame is getting a brand new name, and for those who don't remember, infinity screen is essentially Disney's answer to IMAX. Why does that matter? Because Avengers, Doomsday opens on the same day as Dune, Part 3, and Warner Bros. Managed to lock up every IMAX screen in the United States for 3 full weeks exclusively for Dune. That puts Disney at a direct disadvantage since those large format screens carry higher ticket prices, and that significantly impacts box office revenue. So Disney is betting on infinity screen as its alternative, those screens that extend horizontally on the sides and deliver a fully immersive experience. Spider-Man, Brand New Day will also release in that format, and the big bet is that Doomsday can capitalize on infinity screen to drive its box office numbers. Disney didn't invent this format, but it's actively working with this type of cinematic experience, which isn't just a bigger image, but also enhanced sound. In essence, an IMAX-level experience without technically being IMAX. And according to the Deadline article, Disney, together with theater exhibitors, is already preparing venues for the infinity screen standard. The Endgame re-release now has its official new title, Avengers, Endgame Encore. In English, Encore is exactly what it sounds like when the band has finished playing, the crowd keeps applauding, and they come back out for 1 or 2 more songs that everyone was asking for. That's precisely what this represents, an extra showing, a return. And according to the available information, this new exhibition of Endgame will include a brand new film introduction, new additional scenes, and an exclusive post-credits scene for infinity screen and IMAX formats because for the Endgame re-release, Disney will actually be securing some IMAX screens as well. What everyone really wants to know is, what exactly will that additional material be? Let's start with the personalized introduction. Honestly, that's probably the least exciting part of all this. It'll almost certainly be the director sitting in front of a camera saying something like, "Thank you for coming back to see Endgame." Worth noting that Endgame already had a theatrical re-release back in the day, when Disney was chasing Avatar's box office record. On that occasion, they also added a small introduction, along with a tribute to Stan Lee and a brief unfinished scene of the Hulk saving some people on the street, basically an introduction to Smart Hulk as a hero before he shows up at the diner with the other Avengers. They've also mentioned a special moment at the end of the film, something functioning as an exclusive post-credits scene for the infinity screen and IMAX formats. I don't think that's going to be anything massively important either, probably another thank you or tribute moment. What's genuinely exciting are the brand new, never-before-seen scenes. Footage nobody has ever watched. The directors themselves had previously mentioned that this re-release would leave Endgame more directly connected to the story of Doomsday. And those scenes need to be meaningful. After all, the film is getting a completely new title, Avengers, Endgame Encore. It's effectively a new version of the film. And it appears to contain considerably more new content than that first re-release we mentioned. Before we go any further, hit that like button right now. It gives this channel an enormous boost and allows us to keep producing this level of analysis. And if you're new here, subscribe and follow Avengers Protocol so you don't miss a single video coming up. Every subscription and every like is what makes it possible for this channel to keep growing. Done? Good. Let's keep going. So what could those additional scenes actually be? One possibility is that they're some of the deleted scenes from Endgame. Let's run through what those are, because several of them are available on the film's Blu-ray release. The first shows Tony Stark having a conversation with Pepper Potts, reflecting on whether or not he should help with the time machine project his former teammates were developing. Another scene shows Steve Rogers and War Machine discussing strategies for the plan to travel back in time and recover the Infinity Stones. And War Machine actually roasts Steve, pointing out that in his very first film, Steve crashed his plane into the ocean along with the Tesseract when he simply could have jumped before it went down. That's exactly what War Machine calls him out on. Another scene shows the Avengers continuing their time travel planning, but this time Rocket mocks them because the Leviathan army, which was such a massive threat in the first Avengers film, is basically a joke by the rest of the galaxy's standards. In those deleted scenes, Rocket's visual effects aren't even finalized. There's also a scene of Rocket giving Thor a lesson while they were in Asgard to retrieve the Reality Stone. Another shows Tony having a more extended conversation with his father in the past. And the last one, probably the least impactful, shows the Avengers kneeling in tribute to Tony Stark right after his sacrifice. The directors themselves explained that they cut that scene because they felt it was redundant, since the funeral scene followed immediately after. From my perspective, if Marvel simply finishes the visual effects on these scenes and incorporates them into the film, that alone creates an outstanding extended cut. That would perfectly justify a re-release on its own. But as everyone is probably already noticing, none of those scenes connect to the storyline of Doomsday. So they're going to have to create completely new, original material. And that is the most exciting part of all of this. What I genuinely hope for is something similar to those teasers Marvel placed in theaters before Avatar screenings, where they showed Steve Rogers, then Thor, then the X-Men, then Wakanda, and the Fantastic Four. What became clear, at least to me, is that those teasers came from different locations and contexts. For example, the Wakanda and Fantastic Four teasers could easily be moments we'll see directly in Doomsday. But the Steve Rogers, Thor, and X-Men scenes might not even appear in Doomsday at all. They could be original scenes created exclusively for those teasers, functioning as a prologue to the upcoming film. And what is a confirmed fact is that all of those scenes were filmed during the Doomsday production itself, during the period when the Russo brothers were shooting additional photography and beginning to transition into Secret Wars. So there is absolutely nothing stopping them from also filming one or more scenes specifically designed to be added to the end of this Endgame re-release. I've put together 6 scenes that would be absolutely perfect for this. Option 1. A scene connecting Tony Stark, who dies in Endgame, with Dr. Doom. We already know it's not the same character. Victor Von Doom is not Tony Stark, that's confirmed, but he is played by the same actor. So it's essentially inevitable that Marvel will make some kind of connection, even if symbolic, between the two characters. And here's where it gets really interesting. Endgame didn't have a visual post-credits scene, but it did have a sound over the credits. At the very end, we hear the sound of a hammer striking an anvil, which everyone at the time associated with Tony forging his first Iron Man suit. But Marvel could now retcon that moment, and reveal that those hammer strikes were actually something else entirely. Picture this: in the final seconds of Endgame Encore, we hear that same familiar sound, a scene begins, and what we see isn't Tony Stark, it's Victor Von Doom, forging his own armor or his mask. That would be epic. And it would be the perfect way for Marvel to say, look, the clue was always there. Yes, it would be a total retcon. But Marvel loves doing exactly that, taking a small detail from the past and recontextualizing it to connect with something in the present, then claiming it was all planned. They do it constantly in the comics, and they do it in the films too. Option 2. A scene involving Steve Rogers that gives us more context about what happened to him. The final moment of Endgame was Steve dancing with Peggy Carter in the past, and the first Doomsday teaser we saw showed Steve arriving home and holding his baby in his arms. A new post-credits scene in this re-release could show Steve with his family, with Peggy, revealing more about what his life looked like during that time travel journey, what that happy life was like before some kind of threat disrupts it and forces him back into action in the next Avengers film. This is probably the safest, most straightforward option Marvel could go with. Option 3, and possibly the most impactful of all, one of the biggest open questions at the end of Endgame was how Steve Rogers actually returned all the Infinity Stones. We always assumed he went back to return them first, and then chose to stay in the past with Peggy. But what if it was the other way around? What if he lived out his happy life with Peggy first, and then returned the stones? Since we're talking about time travel, it doesn't matter whether he does it today or tomorrow, he's going back in time either way. So Steve could have reasoned, I'm going to live for a while, and then I'll return the Infinity Stones and Thor's hammer. If that were the case, it would be the perfect opportunity to connect that storyline with the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, which appeared in the Loki series and also played a crucial role in Deadpool and Wolverine. Because suppose that at some point Steve decides it's time to return the stones. Logically, he'd go back to 2012, which was one of the key moments where they retrieved stones, the Mind Stone from Loki's scepter and the Time Stone from the Ancient One. But here's the problem: that 2012 past, which became a branch timeline, is a line that Loki stole the Tesseract from and escaped, and in the Loki series we learn that branch timeline was pruned by the TVA, because at that point the TVA was still controlling the multiverse rather than just patrolling it. So the Loki who stole the Tesseract was arrested by the TVA, and that branch timeline ceased to exist. So where exactly would Steve return to? If that timeline no longer exists, he'd be facing a complete temporal paradox. Because if he returns to before Loki escapes with the Tesseract, that would simply be yet another different reality, since if Loki doesn't flee with the Tesseract, the Avengers would have been able to recover it in that timeline and wouldn't have needed to go back to the S.H.I.E.L.D. base in the 1970s. Total paradox. And that simply confirms something that was always inevitable. The Avengers' time travel broke the multiverse, creating an enormous, seemingly unsolvable mess. That's why I think that when Steve goes to return the Infinity Stones, the TVA could show up, but not to arrest him. The TVA would have already changed by that point, having evolved into a multiverse police force rather than a control mechanism that pruned every branching timeline. With that more reasonable version of the TVA, the one we saw in Deadpool and Wolverine, Steve could simply be guided on how to return the stones without causing further damage, or be given a warning along the lines of, "You can stay in the past, but you have to follow these rules." Because as we saw in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, when someone from another universe interferes too heavily in a different reality, it can cause an incursion and destroy that universe entirely. So the most logical justification is that Steve existing in the past simply created a branch timeline, and the TVA could explain that to him, alert him to the danger of what he's done, or simply instruct him on how to proceed. This scene would be enormously important. It would provide massive context for the next Avengers film, and show exactly what mistake Steve Rogers made, even if that happy life he lived was real and genuine. I think that has to be preserved. But that happy life would inevitably have an expiration date. And a scene of Steve encountering the TVA would basically be the Russo brothers explaining to us exactly when that expiration date arrives. Option 4. A scene involving Loki. For those who watched the Loki series and understand that the Loki who fled with the Tesseract was arrested by the TVA, but eventually became a TVA agent, transformed it from the inside, and simultaneously saved the very existence of the Time Variance Authority. All of that makes perfect sense. But for those who only followed the films and never watched the series, they're going to be completely lost in Doomsday. Because Loki has to play some kind of central role in that story. Not necessarily as the protagonist, but as a key piece of the multiverse. He ended up at the center of the multiverse, let's not forget. So a post-credits scene in the Endgame re-release could show some of that, even briefly, to clarify for the audience that only goes to the movies what the current state of the Marvel multiverse actually is, especially since the directors have already said the film is designed to be accessible to people who only saw Endgame. Option 5. A scene introducing the classic X-Men. We already know that the original Fox X-Men actors are going to appear in Doomsday. So a post-credits scene presenting them would be perfect for generating that first big impact, that anticipation. It wouldn't need to be elaborate at all. It could just be a few seconds showing the characters and their visual look. Or it could even be the actual first scene featuring them from Doomsday itself, because Marvel has already used scenes from the next film as post-credits sequences before. For example, in the first Ant-Man, the second post-credits scene was Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson interrogating Bucky as he struggled with his memories and identity. And the second Spider-Man, No Way Home post-credits was a teaser for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness that cut off right at the first scene between Doctor Strange and the Scarlet Witch. Nothing is stopping the X-Men's first scene in Doomsday from appearing at the end of Endgame Encore. Option 6. Showing the new Avengers lineup. At the end of Captain America, Brave New World, Sam Wilson decided he was going to form his own team of Avengers. Where is that team? Are we just going to meet them cold in Doomsday with no prior introduction? Since Endgame already ends with Steve handing his shield to Sam Wilson implying he'll be the new Captain America, knowing that Captain America is one of the Avengers leaders, the re-release could jump directly to a post-credits scene or closing scene that skips the time in between and presents the new Avengers team directly to the audience. In the same way Avengers: Age of Ultron did at the end, Steve walking with Black Widow, arriving at the Avengers compound training room where the new team members are assembled. Just that. Simple. Clean. Marvel wouldn't need anything more than that to prepare audiences for what's coming in Doomsday. Any one of these 6 options would be incredible. All 6 of them at once? Absolute perfection. Am I dreaming a little too big? Maybe. But that's exactly what makes the MCU worth following in the first place. Tell me in the comments which of these options you'd most want to see, or if you think Marvel is going to surprise us with something none of us saw coming. Drop a like on the video if you made it all the way to the end, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and follow Avengers Protocol so you don't miss a single analysis of everything that's on the way. Every like, every subscription is what allows us to keep producing this kind of in-depth content for this entire community. There are more videos on screen right now, go watch them. This is Avengers Protocol, signing out.